Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Win Bugs and Influence Hackers. My name's Adam Bacchus. I'm a Senior Program Manager in Android Security. Today, we'll talk about what a vulnerability disclosure program is, why you should bother considering creating one, how to determine if you're ready, and how to actually set up, launch, and run your program. So what is a VDP? A vulnerability disclosure program, or VDP for short, enables your organization to work with hackers to uncover and fix vulnerabilities in your assets. At the most basic level, a VDP lets you work with hackers that find vulnerabilities and report them directly to you. You respond and say, yep, this is a real vulnerability, we'll look into that, or no, sorry, this is a false positive and here's why. You update the hacker as you progress towards remediation, and in addition to finding and fixing one-off bugs, you can use this data to improve your overall security program by identifying why each vulnerability was not caught internally. Easy, right? Sounds pretty simple. Open the door to working with friendly hackers of the world, find and fix vulnerabilities, reduce the risk of a breach, and PR fallout. Super simple. Well, before you dive straight in, you might want to consider everything that could go horribly wrong. There are a lot of reasons you might not want to start a VDP. You may already feel like your security resources are stretched pretty thin. What if you can't respond to reports or fix bugs fast enough? What if internal stakeholders wouldn't even go for the idea of working with hackers? What if hackers go rogue and steal data or cause service interruptions? These are all valid considerations. While it's relatively easy to spin up a VDP with nothing more than a web page and a security at email address, if you want to truly benefit from a VDP, you need to first understand the true value of having one, be able to achieve buy-in from necessary stakeholders with that understanding, prepare yourself and your organization, then launch your own VDP. Seems like a ton of work, so why bother? Well, to help illustrate the value of a VDP, I'd like to tell you a quick story about Bob and his nuggets. That's right, Bob's Nuggets. Bob's Nuggets is an app that helps users buy and sell precious metals from each other. The app handles sensitive user data such as name, gold inventory, birthday, home address, phone number, you name it, it's in the app. Enter Abby, a security consultant that likes to find and squish security bugs, as well as an avid precious metal trader who is a user of the Bob's Nuggets app. While using the app, she creates a second test account and discovers a vulnerability that enables her to see the user data in her second test account from her primary account. Abby realizes this vulnerability could be used by any user of Bob's Nuggets to gain unauthorized access to the data of any other user in the entire app. Abby is reasonably concerned about the presence of this vulnerability and would like to inform Bob's Nuggets. What do you think happens next? Well, one possible scenario plays out like this. Abby tries to figure out how to report the vulnerability to Bob's Nuggets, but she can't find any way of contacting them other than a support email address. Bob's Nuggets support staff get the email, but they're not trained in security. They have no idea with Abby's report. Abby gets really frustrated at this point and decides to blog or tweet about the vulnerability. A tech journalist sees Abby's tweet and publishes a negative article about Bob's Nuggets exposing user data. And at this point, Bob and his team need to scramble to fix the bug and handle PR fallout, financial loss, and other negative impacts from the incident. Let's hit reset. Starting over again, let's assume that Bob's Nuggets has rolled up their sleeves and done the work to create a VDP. Abby Googles for the phrase report vulnerability to Bob's Nuggets and discovers a page describing Bob's VDP and how to report vulnerabilities to them. Abby reports the vulnerability privately and directly to Bob's Nuggets via their program. Bob and his team review the report, thank Abby, and they're able to fix the bug. Due to Abby's great experience with Bob's team, she uses her security expertise to continue to find and report vulnerabilities to Bob's Nuggets. Bob even considers interviewing and hiring Abby to help augment his information security team. So as you can see, there are many benefits to creating a vulnerability disclosure or bug bounty program. Having a structured process for accepting vulnerability reports helps point researchers in the direction of the issues and properties that you care about and away from the ones that you're maybe not as interested in. As opposed to one-off security testing, having a program like this in place enables you to receive vulnerability reports from researchers as bugs are introduced into production, as opposed to, for example, once a quarter or once a year. In addition to identifying individual vulnerabilities, any bug reported to your program indicates a gap in your existing security processes. By performing root cause analysis, you can determine how to improve your existing security processes to reduce the risk of such vulnerabilities making it to your production environment moving forward. Some view having a VDP as admitting weakness in your existing security program, but nobody has perfect security. VDPs are an extension of your existing security program and are particularly helpful to crowdsource security skill sets and resources that may not already exist within your team. Publicly discussing your VDP can actually help position you as taking security seriously. Many organizations use this as positive PR and a competitive advantage against peers that don't have such programs in place. Hopefully I've sold you on the benefits of a VDP, but how do you know if you're ready to start one? Well, before we jump in, I'd like to plug the Vulnerability Disclosure Program Guide on Play Academy. It covers these topics in much more detail than I will in this talk, and there'll be a link to it at the end of this deck, or you can Google for Vulnerability Disclosure Program Guide on Play Academy, or you can just ping me if you'd like the link or have any questions. The following will be a higher level version of how to know if you're ready, how to prepare for, and how to launch your VDP. First things first, how does your organization handle vulnerabilities today? If vulnerability leaves you scrambling and panicked, like this poor fellow on the left, you might need to cover some basics first, such as asset management and knowing your attack surface, having developed a means for performing basic security assessments and reviews to identify issues, and have a basic vulnerability management program in place. In other words, be able to gracefully handle new security bugs as they pop up. You'll also want to consider, what does security culture look like at your organization today? Is hacker considered a bad word by default, or is hacking a core tenet of company culture? When someone says the word hacker, do you picture someone like this, baking up ransomware and doing other evil things like, I suppose in this image, sending horse emojis? Do you have solid relationships between security, engineering, parts of your organization, and where does security fit in the priority stack for leadership? So these are all things you want to take into consideration before you get started. Before you launch a VDP, as mentioned earlier, you'll want the basics of finding bugs in place. If you already have the setup, I apologize for the next couple of slides, but maybe you'll still learn something new. If you don't have the basics in place and start a VDP prematurely, you'll end up burning a lot of energy and a lot of resources on very basic issues that you could have identified and fixed yourself internally with a lot less effort. So when it comes to finding bugs, the first thing you'll want to do is set up basic vulnerability scans. First, you'll have to consider, what am I scanning? You'll need asset management and a good understanding of your attack surface. After that, you'll want to figure out what tools you're going to use. So you'll have to think about how to decide which tools you'll use for scanning, what your requirements are, and maybe look at a requirements template. There are a few out there. I have one that I can share as well to help you figure out what's important in terms of a tool for your organization. Third, you want to think about your scanning setup. So how often will you run scans? Are you going to run them with or without credentials? Who's on duty if something goes wrong with the scan and it impacts production? And lastly, what will you do with the scan output? You can know that the sky is falling, but unless you have an umbrella or some tape for the clouds, it doesn't mean much. Security only improves when bugs are fixed, not found. In addition to vulnerability scans, you'll want to have a good security review process in place. More in-depth security reviews should occur whenever changes happen that could introduce new risks. This includes creating new functionality or modifying existing functionality that handles or impacts sensitive user data and functionality, changes to your production environment, and bringing on new vendors access to sensitive data. The easier you make it to request a review and work with the security function in your org, the more likely it is to happen. How you build this process is up to you, but having some form or something along those lines that gathers the relevant context and helps you prioritize the review based on potential risk will help you optimize your resources, which brings us to step 3, performing reviews. Consider varying the depth of your review based on the potential risk. If someone is spinning up a one-off third-party hosted marketing website to share information about a holiday party, it will probably require less scrutiny than a review of new functionality impacting how users log into your app. This might seem obvious, but having well-defined, agreed-upon processes on what constitutes a high versus medium versus low-risk security review will help set expectations appropriately throughout the org in terms of how much effort will be spent on it, how urgently the review needs to be completed, and so on. If your security review process is inefficient and becomes a bottleneck, People will take the path of least resistance and try to find ways around it or skip it entirely. Be compassionate, understand the needs of the business, and try to balance that with what is and is not required in order to pass or complete the security review successfully. Last but not least, and this is a sticky point for many organizations, you'll need to determine how to handle the output of your reviews. Will security reviews always block a change? Probably not. You may recommend a variety of improvements and fixes to reduce risk, but how do you know it will actually be implemented? Similar to the output of scans, you'll need to take a nuanced approach to balancing how hard you chase after ensuring certain recommendations are followed versus what is considered acceptable risk, the timeline of acting on these recommendations, and so on. There are whole books, talks, and conferences dedicated to finding bugs, so please spend some time digging deeper to figure out what makes the most sense for your organization. But having basic tooling and processes in place for vulnerability scanning and security reviews can go a long way towards preparing you for launching a VDP. So, assuming you've got tooling and processes in place to find bugs, how do you make sure they actually get fixed? In the next few slides, we'll cover best practices to ensure you have smooth processes in place for handling discovered security issues. If you start a VDP without these basics in place, your team can become overwhelmed by the new stream of bugs a vulnerability disclosure program will generate. Vulnerabilities can come from a variety of sources and vary widely in importance. Perhaps most importantly, newly discovered vulnerabilities are almost always unexpected work. Especially when teams are already busy, it can be really tough to negotiate buy and to spend time to fix up security issues. To ensure vulnerabilities are communicated to the right stakeholders, prioritized correctly, and fixed in a timely manner, your organization will need ways to consistently categorize vulnerabilities. If you don't already have agreed upon severity standards and associated remediation timelines, consider doing a threat modeling exercise to identify what threats are most likely to impact your organization. With this knowledge in hand, you can create a shared understanding of what constitutes a critical, high, medium, or low severity issue, and identify associated timelines with each severity for identifying an owner, as well as fixing or mitigating the issue. This table is just an example, and it could be adjusted to meet the needs of your business in terms of what types of issues fall into which severity and what timelines make sense based on available resources. For example, a financial institution might consider a vulnerability that provides unauthorized access to proprietary trading algorithms to be critical severity. On top of how a bug is categorized, you'll want to make it as easy as possible to understand what the bug is and how to fix it. This table illustrates common fields to include in the bugsy file. By standardizing the format of vulnerability write-ups, they become easier to parse and more likely to get picked up and fixed. When you set up and launch your VDP, you can also use this format when asking external security researchers to provide information on the bugs they submit to you. As mentioned previously, vulnerabilities are often a source of unexpected work. When trying to find an owner to review and address a vulnerability, first explain why the bug is important to fix in a timely manner and check in to ensure the owner understands. In this step, the impact and attack scenario from your vulnerability write-up, as well as the severity table, are good data points to help persuade an owner to take on and fix the bug. So let's say you try all of that. Nobody will step up to own and fix this bug. In these cases, it's important to gather context, especially around other tasks they're working on. Take the time to find out what these are. It's possible that other tasks might be more important than fixing your vulnerability. Earn goodwill and strengthen your relationship with those that you need to fix vulnerabilities by demonstrating empathy and flexibility on remediation timelines. Another reason you might have trouble getting a bug fixed is the owner might be confused on what the issue is, or they need help learning how to fix the bug. If they need help figuring out how to fix it, take the time to help teach them. This will empower owners to fix not only this bug, but also future similar vulnerabilities. In some cases, you might need to adapt your request beyond just filing a bug with your standard vulnerability write-up. Various teams may have existing processes for how they accept and prioritize work requests. Take the time, adapt your request to fit the format that the team or individual normally uses to intake requests. This can help increase the likelihood of your request being prioritized and actioned. If all else fails, you've tried all of these things only escalate as a last resort. Escalating to leadership should be a last resort for critical issues that are not being taken seriously. Be aware this can damage your relationship with the individual or team in question. All right, our bug wrangling processes are set up. We're done, right? Nope. Sorry. Time to get everyone on board with the idea of launching a VDP. When pitching your VDP, consider the various stakeholders' perspectives, especially your own security function, engineering, legal, and PR, including potential concerns they may have, as well as how you can shift your pitch for creating a VDP towards benefits specific to each function. IT wants to keep everything up and running smoothly. They may have concerns around researchers going rogue and crashing systems, causing denial of service attacks, and so on. Here's the thing. Criminals don't play by the rules. Criminals will scan and exploit vulnerabilities to their heart's content, whether you like it or not. The whole point of a vulnerability disclosure program is to work with friendly researchers that want to work with you to find vulnerabilities. In fact, having a VDP can help you uncover vulnerabilities that could degrade system performance or cause issues that would take up more of IT's time if exploited versus being found and fixed quickly through your VDP. On top of that, security researchers' recon processes can also help with asset discovery, uncovering rogue assets that were spun up without IT's knowledge, old services that were never spun down, and properly configured cloud storage. The list goes on. Unless your security function takes on the task of fixing all identified vulnerabilities themselves, you'll need your engineering organization on board with your VDP. Your VDP will introduce a new stream of vulnerabilities that your engineering team will need to address. Work with leadership in the engineering organization to get buy-in on dedicating resources towards fixing these bugs. When a VDP launches, there's usually a spike of bugs at the beginning, and then it reduces to a moderate level. You can make the process smoother for engineering, security, and hackers participating in your VDP by having the engineering team ready to address the majority of bugs in the first few weeks of your program. Legal and PR might be concerned with the risk a VDP could introduce in terms of a potential breach and its associated ramifications. Without a VDP, security researchers that want to do the right thing and inform you of the issue will have no standard way of reaching you. Having a VDP in place provides a means for security researchers to help you find and fix vulnerabilities before they become actual legal and PR issues. All right. You've got the basics in place, you're comfortable handling bugs, and necessary stakeholders are on board. It's time to create your VDP. The first thing you'll need to do is create your program policy. Your program policy is the first thing any security researcher participating in your program will see. The program policy will set the tone for how you engage with hackers, as well as define your expectations for testing guidelines and scope. It usually takes the form of a web page, either hosted internally or on a third-party platform that provides the ability to create and host a VDP. When drafting your program policy, don't forget to include your stakeholders for feedback and review. The last thing you want is to launch your VDP only to have to make last-minute changes once it's live. The content of your policy will vary based on your organizational needs, but there are 3 elements you should always include. 1, a researcher promise. 2, testing guidelines, and 3, scope. Every good program policy should begin with your promise to researchers. This should include what commitments your organization will make to coordinate with security researchers that act in good faith and follow the testing guidelines outlined in your policy. For example, this could be a commitment to respond to incoming security reports within a specific time frame and communicate decisions on whether you'll accept a vulnerability or not. Additionally, you may want to include safe harbor language in this section of your policy to allow security researchers to work on your platforms in good faith without fear of legal action. Disclose.io provides template safe harbor language that you can use, but you'll need to work with your legal team to evaluate this language and adapt it to your needs. The second element, testing guidelines, indicates what sort of security testing you're okay with, as well as what types of security testing you would like researchers to stay away from. For example, you might include language asking researchers to only test using their own accounts and data and to stay away from social engineering or any attacks that might cause service interruptions. Lastly, you'll need to consider what the scope of your program is. indicating to researchers what assets are in scope, meaning you're okay with researchers testing against it, as well as what assets are out of scope that you prefer researchers not to test against. The size of your scope is critical to researcher engagement. It's good to start small and scale up, but if you only put a single website into scope with no authenticated functionality, hackers will be uninterested in testing as the likelihood of finding any bugs is pretty low. You'll want to balance this with putting everything in scope, as you might end up with more vulnerability reports than you have the capacity to handle. This can cause delays in responding to security researchers, which can also decrease engagement with your program. Finding the right balance of what assets to put in scope is vital. This will keep hackers engaged while not overwhelming your team. You can always add more scope to your program over time, but it can be really frustrating for hackers if you start with a lot of scope and then you take it out reactively. When it comes to writing up your scope in your program policy, here's a detailed example for a domain related to email. It includes a description of the asset with detailed instructions on how to test against it. Here's a more simple example that simply lists assets that are in scope and out of scope. It's up to you how detailed or not you'd like to get with your scope, but the more info you provide, the easier it will be for researchers to start finding and reporting vulnerabilities to you. We're finally there. Exciting. It's time to launch your VDP. We've got well-established processes, stakeholders are on board, and our program policy is drafted. Let's go over best practices before you go live. When you first launch your VDP, you'll want to have a few people on duty to triage incoming vulnerability reports, file bugs, and communicate with researchers. On top of handling vulnerability reports, triaging your VDP can include responding to feedback from hackers about your program, the rules, how it works, identifying gaps or misunderstandings in your program policy, and finding issues in your processes or tooling. Since this is highly interrupt-driven work, you can set up a weekly on-duty rotation to share the load of triage across your team. To ensure your on-duty team doesn't get overwhelmed, let's talk about the concept of private and public programs. Start out small by proactively inviting 4 or 5 trusted external security researchers to view your program policy and give them a means of submitting vulnerability reports directly to you. This could be a security email address or a web form that only invited researchers have access to. Setting up your VDP this way gives you a private or invite-only style program that lets you test the waters at a comfortable pace. A public program, on the other hand, involves publishing your program policy and means for receiving reports for anyone to see. Starting public immediately can result in many issues, including more reports than your team can handle, as well as not giving you enough time to work out any issues in your program at a smaller scale. So again, start small. There will always be surprises when you launch your VDP. You might receive more vulnerabilities than expected. Someone from your team might unexpectedly become unavailable, leaving you with less resources. During the course of testing, a researcher might accidentally break part of your app or break production. Who knows? Whatever these surprises might be, it's important to be aware they can happen and roll with the punches, as well as plan ahead of time to ensure you have the bandwidth to handle them. This is why it's so important to start small in private mode and invite-only mode, learn from these lessons, and scale up your program over time. You might get a ton of reports in your first few weeks, or you might not get any. Inviting security researchers does not mean they will instantly be available or find vulnerabilities immediately. You might start to worry thinking all of your hard work has gone to waste. Don't worry, this is normal. This is when you'll want to scale up slowly. Invite 5 more security researchers, see what your report volume looks like, and then invite 10 more. If you're using a third-party platform, they often have automated mechanisms that will invite hackers slowly over time based on your desired report volume. If you get a huge number of vulnerability reports after only inviting 5 security researchers, hold off on inviting any more until your report volume slows down. Once you're feeling comfortable with your processes, you've invited numerous security researchers, and report volume seems to have hit a steady pace, you may be ready to launch your program publicly. A public program includes a publicly accessible program policy and submission form. When you launch publicly, anyone can submit a vulnerability report, anybody in the entire world. This can generate more noise, but also enables you to work with new, highly skilled hackers. Your public VDP allows the global hacking community to disclose vulnerabilities directly to you. Only publicly launch your program after scaling it up in private mode. When you launch publicly, reconnect with stakeholders in case you need assistance and prepare your team for a potential spike in report volume. Again, once you launch publicly, anyone can submit a vulnerability report, so this can greatly increase the throughput of your program. You'll also want to have templates in place to close out common non-security related reports quickly. You'll learn what common non-issues are reported during your private program phase and iterate further on these templates once you launch publicly. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this talk. I'd like to spend the last few minutes telling you about the Google Play Security Reward Program. The Google Play Security Reward Program, or GPSRP for short, is a bug bounty program offered by Google Play. A bug bounty program is similar to a vulnerability disclosure program, except it includes rewarding researchers monetarily for helping identify issues. GPSRP incentivizes security researchers to find and report vulnerabilities to you, after which they can get a reward from Google. If you'd like to learn more, please apply to join and check out g.co/playacademy/VDP for more detailed guidance on how to create and launch your VDP. All right, that's it. Thanks. No questions. I must have covered everything.